today we're going to be using the JSON placeholders API again. For this time, we're actually just going to be using the users endpoint. Pretty much this right here. To get to the JSON placeholder API, you just have to go hit JSON placeholder.type code. I'll add that in the description. But let me just see if we can zoom in a bit. So we're going to be using this endpoint, users. We already have 2 videos up where we're using to-dos and photos. So today we're going to touch with. So let's just take a look at this. So the users data is pretty simple. It's just so it's 10 of them. It represents each user. As I say, it looks like almost all the types are strings, and then we have the ID as an integer. So we're gonna build this using SwiftUI with MVVM. So let's just jump into Xcode here and minimize. And so we'll start by creating a new project app, and then for this one we will say users JSON placeholder. Then we'll just hit next and create. All right, so let's maximize this. And let's zoom in a bit just so that it's easier for everyone to see. And to minimize our preview here. That looks pretty nice. All right, so the first thing is, let's just build out some quick UI that we might need to present each user. So I'm thinking that it's just going to be a list of each users that we have decoded from the API. I'm thinking we could put this in a tab view too, because what we want to do is we're going to touch each endpoint that's provided by the JSON placeholder API. So first thing, let's get rid of this. And then we're going to replace this with just a tab view. And we're going to make our first users screen, like our users list screen. So let's start by creating a folder. Seems like I made our unit test and our UI test already, but we can just close those for now. So we'll go by saying new folder, and we will call this users view. And within users view, we're just going to start by creating like a SwiftUI view, and we'll just call this literal users view. That's where we're going to show a list of all the users that we have and decoded from the API. So within here, let's add a navigation stack, because we might want to make it that we can tap on the user and then like push to see more detail about that specific user. So we'll add a navigation stack, and then we'll just add a V stack in there. And let's just add some basic text so that we can ensure that we're actually seeing the screen. So for this, I'll just say nerdy. And then what we want to do now is use our users view. You see it updates on the preview here, but this isn't really where we want to exactly show it. So we're gonna use our users view inside our content view. So let's just bring that here. Let's jump back to content view, and then we're gonna type in users view. And you notice we already see it inside our content view because we added this. So since we're using this in a tab view, we can also add like a tab item. So like some that the different sections that the user can tap on. We're gonna say add a modifier, and pretty much again, a modifier is just a way how you can add additional features to some type of view or just some type of view in SwiftUI. So we start by saying dot tab item. We'll still make a stack. The first thing we want for our tab bar button is pretty much we're gonna use a system. We want an image, so we got that there, and Apple makes it really good. So where they provide certain type of created images already, or predefined images already that we can use right out of the box. We just have to specify the name, and then when we want to use one of their predefined images, whenever we called image, we just have to specify that we want to use system name type of image. That's why we see here. The next thing I want to do, also, if you want to see more of the images, You can find all of them by just opening up SF symbols. You can download this Apple's website, and SF will have a list of all of the images that are available to you. A bunch of them, like pretty much everything that you could think. So what's new, different categories, animations, so pretty much everything. Anything that you might really did not require. Let's see what else they have for person. In case I want to change a bit. I kind of like the person, not circle more. So I'll just right click or double tap and then do copy name, and I'll minimize our symbols again and jump back into Xcode. And instead of just doing the person's image, let's do person or circle. I see it updates to this. All right, so I like that. So the next thing I want under this is some type of text. So the image does kind of give you an idea of what it's about, but it would be better if you have some type of text so the user can read and find out. Let's just call this users. And I'm just gonna change to showing whenever I run this, change to using a simulator, so the iPhone 16 Pro Max for that. All right, so we have our basic setup right now. What we need to do now is pretty much create like a basic UI that we can use to show each user in this. So let's jump back to our users view. And we're going to replace that text with a list. And inside this list, it's gonna pretty much be that's gonna pretty much hold all the data that we get from the API. So what we can do now is say vstack, and this is gonna represent each element in the list. So we can say a vstack, and you see the view already, the preview already updates to reflect this. All right, so the preview already reflects this. So let's start by typing in text just to see what this is gonna look like. Okay, so we're just really showing one type of text right here. But if we go back to our API, we see that it's a bunch of other parameters that we're actually going to have. So we have all of these. We might not use all of these, but all of them are available to us. And we want our UI to be as detailed as needed to get the best experience. What I'm going to do is I'm going to minimize this and put this kind of side by side with our response. That way we can properly assess like what do we have to work with. All right, so okay, cool. Yeah, so we have so one thing where we have a name of the user. We actually have the user's username. We have their email, address is included as well as phone, website, computer. So since we're gonna be showing both the list view and then we're gonna have a detailed view that we can go to, we don't need to show all of this data on the first screen. So let's think about some things. I'm thinking that we could just do username. So we could say the nerdy audio, it's Brett. And then we have Brett there. We don't have to show all of this data, but it would be good if we could show, say, street and probably the city. And yeah, so let's go with just the street and the city. Copy this. So right now we're just stubbing out and like mocking up the data. We're actually going to move to using real live data from the API, but we just want to build out a mock version of the view for now. We'll say how that looks, and you see how it's aligned like this. I don't really like that. I think because the VStacks, anything inside a VStack is automatically trying to center it. What I want to do instead is make it aligned to the left, so that leading. Okay. So we have the name. Let's give this a bold. All right. Okay, so we added this a bold. I see that looks a little bit better for the UI perspective. We can basically see it better. Other thing that we mentioned that we kind of want to show is, say, the city. So we have some word right here. So we want to have some almost like this. So we're gonna do probably some string interpolation to add in different properties inside the string. So super simple. So we still, so now we have their name, pretty much the location. What we could do too is add, okay, we could use company name. That would be probably a really good one. We could put company name to the top right corner. So let's add that here. We'll say HStack. We'll add, but we can kind of hide this for now. Don't really need this. That way we can use more real estate. Perfect. All right, so we're gonna put our text with the name here inside a HStack. So we could just highlight that and just do edit in HStack. Then we'll do like a spacer, add some space between them. And then we could say text. Okay. And one thing I don't really like, I don't like how close breadth is to the location here. So let's add like a padding. And we're gonna add it to the HStack. Gonna say top bottom. Okay, that looks a little bit better. I feel like we can kind of work with this a little bit. So, okay. So we have like a basic view like this. So I don't want us to be using our view just like this, like just bare bones into the open. What we could do instead is compress this or change this to be a custom, like a reusable SwiftUI view. So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna say Command C, and then inside users view folder, we're gonna make another folder. Let's just call this users row view. I'll just call it row view, and then the file will actually call users row view. Then we'll start by creating another SwiftUI file. To get that really fast, I just hit Command N. I'll say like user row view. And then we're just gonna replace this text right here with the information that we copied from the previous screen. So right now you see it's kind of anchored to the edges of the screen. But when we were using it inside, say here, it wasn't anchored to the edge of the screen. And that's pretty much because we're getting the padding that's provided to us from using it inside a list, so that we automatically get that behavior. So what we can do now, since users row pretty much has the same, it has the same stuff as we had here in the list, we can just replace this entire VStack with just users row view, user row view, and you'll see that it's gonna look like the same thing. Okay. Perfect. So now we have like a basic UI that we can use for each cell in our list. So that's the first. Next thing now. So the next thing we're gonna do now is we're actually gonna try to see and create like a services layer so that we can actually get the data from the API and then model it to some to the data, create some models to represent that data. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna create another folder. This is going to be a new folder, and we're gonna call this services. And inside services, we're gonna be like, come on. Actually, let's wait 1 second before we do services. We'll keep the folder, but we're gonna add one more folder too. So this is going to be our models folder. this is what we're going to use to represent each of the data that we have. So say models, and then we'll create a Swift file, not a SwiftUI file. And we'll call this models as well. Now, I don't want to go back and forth with this time. So what I'm going to do is just copy one of these elements here from the JSON, and I'm going to drop it inside our models file, but I'm going to comment it out. Really just doing this because I don't want to be doing the back and forth, just to find out what properties we're using, etc. So I'm just going to comment it out for now, and it'll start by saying struct user, and user will make it that the properties that it has is matching pretty much everything in our JSON here: the ID, name, user, email, address, etc. So we'll start by saying ID. Let name, and let's do username too. We need that. Then email. All the strings. So pretty much all of these are strings except for the ID, and then this custom object here that we're gonna have for address. So let's make the address type, and we have to make a custom address type to handle for this case. Basically, it's not exactly just like a string or a boolean or just some basic data type. So we have to create a custom data type to handle this next. So let's create one more. So let's call this user address, and then let's see what it has inside of it. So now we can uncomment this, and we'll set its types to be user address. And then within user address, so let's see, the first thing is etc. Add those in. And we have city. Zip code. There's a bunch of them, so just bear with me. And then you see that we have another nested object. So this one is one to represent our location, our coordinates. So we have to make another type, because remember, it's not a type that just comes with it. So it's not a string, a boolean, an int, etc. So we're gonna make another type, and we're gonna call this struct user coordinates. This is called coordinates. And all this is gonna have is just a lot. I don't know why they made it a string, but a lot and a long. And then let's have our user address use this new type that we created. User coordinate. Okay, so now this model that we have, users, will now be good to represent data that we will get from the API. So we can get rid of this now. Don't need this anymore. We just wanted this to help us write this out pretty fast. So now that we're done with our models, we have the models that we need. Now we're going to jump back over to services. So pretty much what we were doing before. We'll start by creating a Swift file, instead not a SwiftUI file, but a Swift file. And we're going to call this services. I just call it user services. Services. Okay. And we'll start by creating a protocol to represent our user services. And the reason we're doing it like this is because we're gonna have our API service as a dependency for our view model, but we want to also be able to test our view model unit tests by giving it mock service, that we're not firing real APIs inside our unit tests. So we'll start by making a protocol. And then we'll say this is called user service, user services. And all it's gonna do is just pretty much just fetch users. And because we're going to be using Swift Concurrency for this, we're going to be using an async await approach. So we have to put async. We also want to be able to handle our errors by throwing an error. So we'll say throws. And remember, we created the user model. So we want to, whenever we get that data from the API, we want to convert it to an array of users. So we have to put the return type now. So we say user. Okay. And now that's just a protocol, but now we need a class that's actually gonna implement this. So we'll say class user services, and we'll say impl. That's pretty much how I do it, but you can pretty much call this whichever works best for you. And then we'll just have it conform to user services, which is gonna require us to implement the fetch users function. Okay. All right. So the next thing that we need, okay, it's complaining because it's saying, well, then I'm supposed to return something, but you're not returning it. So for now, I'm just gonna have it return an empty array. We're gonna update this to actually have it fetch the actual data and handle errors. All right, so the next thing that we need now is actually the API endpoint. And we can get that just by jumping back to Safari or whatever browser you're using and just grabbing the URL here. This is our API endpoint. Say, come on, minimize that. Close SF symbol and we'll maximize back Xcode. And we could say private let user, we could just say endpoint. The string, do that. So now we have our endpoint that we need to hit so that we can get the data. But right now it's a string, so we need to convert it to be a URL. So we'll say guard let URL of URL string, and we'll have it be endpoint. Else. So usually with guides, I know a lot of times you just return whatever the error is or whatever I need to return. But instead of doing that, we want to be able to throw errors. So now I'm going to do another return, and then I'm going to create, but just for now, just as a placeholder, we're going to start creating our custom error. So say enum. I will have this say user service error. And all we have to do is make sure that it conforms to the error type provided by Apple. And then for this, since we want to handle for if the endpoint that we have when we try to convert it to a URL, it's invalid, create a case to represent. So let's say invalid URL. And then we'll get rid of this portion that we're returning, and instead of returning, we'll just throw an error. So we'll say throw user service error that invalid URL. I notice that it's not flagging for my issue anymore. Okay, so the next thing now that we need to do now that we have the URL is actually use this URL to get the data. So we're gonna say let data. This is using Swift Concurrency, so we're gonna say let data, and then to get it, we're gonna say URL session that shared that data, and I have to make sure I use the async one and one that just needs a URL. I'll just drop in my URL here. And so one thing is you see this error that came up, it's saying that one, using it like this is it could throw error, so you have to mark it with try. Another thing is that whenever you have functions like this that are async, you also, and you're calling them, you have to also mark an await. So it's basically you're waiting for the data to come back. Okay? But we don't see any more error warnings, but there is actually still an error issue here. We don't have a way how to handle if the process fails. Like we don't have a way to catch that error. So what we're going to do is move this temporarily, and then we're going to put it inside a do catch block. And then we're going to put catch here. And then for the error, we're going to kind of worry about this a little bit later. Let's focus on the success case. So the success case is whatever is in the do. Catch case is whenever an error occurs. All right, so thing now is, so we have data, we have response. We need to check to make sure that the response is correct, like the response status code. That's usually like 200 or somewhere between 200 and like 299. And to do that, we say we need to convert response to a HTTP, convert this response to a HTTP URL response. So we'll say guard let HTTP URL response is equal to response, and we're going to be casting it to a HTTP URL response. Now that we have done this, we know we can get a property that we want from HTTP URL response, and that's status code, and that has the status code integer value of whatever we're looking for. So we want to make sure that it's between 200 and 299. So we'll say 200, create like an array of a range of numbers, and I'll say I'm gonna check if our HTTP URL response status code is between either 200 or 299. And if it is, then we know we have a successful API. So right now it's saying that if these do fail though, we don't want to just return. What we want to do again is throw an error. So we'll say case, and we'll say, let's just call it a response, invalid response, invalid status code. Status code. And we're just going to throw the error here. So we'll just say throw service error, and then we'll just say invalid status code. Okay, and that's now we've checked that. So before we start using the data and decoding it, we check that status code is good and the URL response is fine. Next thing we're going to do now is actually start the fun part, actually decoding the data. So we'll say let users, and to decode it, we have to use a JSON decoder. We'll say decode, and then we want to decode it to the way how we want to return the data. So an array of users. So we put the type here. I'll say that self, and we'll pass in that data. And now have oh yeah, so it's flagging some error here saying that JSON decoder requires that user conform to decodable. So how we can fix that pretty easy. All we have to do is jump back to users, and like it said, it needs whatever we're trying to decode needs to conform a decodable protocol. So to make it conform, all we have to do is pretty much jump to our model and then just type in decodable. But we also need to do it for all our nested properties too, because you see it says type here do not conform to decodable. So we need to also do it for our user address because it's a nested property, the decodable. And you notice that we still see an error here. So we need to take it one more step further, and we have another nested property called user coordinate. So we'll do the same thing and make it conform to decodable. And now our error should be gone. All right, good. All right, so now what we're going to do is you're going to see this error actually disappear too, but it's still saying that we should mark it as a try because this can fail. We are already in a do catch though, so you don't have to worry about wrapping this in another do catch. And now you see our errors are gone. So the final thing that we need to do is that we need to return these users. They return users. So you see a case here where it's like, say if the JSON decoder does fail or some other error should occur, all we're doing here is just printing an error. We're not actually sending back that error. So what we can do now is add a custom case that takes the error message recommended by Apple and kind of mix it and use it for to let the user know the issue that's happening. What we could do to do this is say add another case. Let's scroll up. Another case and call this custom error, and we'll have it accept a type of string, and that string type is going to be like the error message that we get from the error provided in the catch block. Sounds confusing, but as we start doing it, it's going to make more sense. So inside, you notice that I never declared an error property or variable inside our catch block. So what's happening is that once you're in a catch block, there's already an error property, error value that you can use. So I'm going to pass and I'm going to use our custom error, and I'm going to throw error and accept that error provided by Apple. So we'll say throw, and we'll say user service error. I will say custom, and then the string that we're going to pass in is error.localize description. So and then we can get rid of this extra portion here that we're just returning an empty array. Okay. So now our service is basically set up. We do need to do some more work to handling for errors by probably providing like a more readable description for errors. But for now, we'll jump back. But for now, let's just, so we have our services logic here. And what we want to do is use this service logic to get data inside our app. So we need a way how to pass that data to one, get the data, and then pass that data to our view. So, well, since we're using MVVM, this is where the VM part comes in, the view model. So we need to create another class called view model, and it's going to be linked to our users view. So let's jump back to our users view folder, and we'll say command N, make another Swift file, and then we'll say users view model. And then within here, this is where we're just going to make a class, call it users view model. And we want to use this to handle our services. So it needs access to our services. So we have to add it as a dependency. Pretty much like so you can think of it a way where we want to add an additional feature to our class, and it's an outside feature. So let's add it as a dependency. Yeah. So let's add our services. So we'll say let services. Yes, user services. Let's just do services. We'll make it conform to our protocol type, user services. And you see Xcode flagging us that we're not initializing. Pretty much you just need to make an init, and it will just conform to it, and the errors are gone. So not conform to it, but it'll make the required that it needs. Yeah. So once we have this, what we need to do is make it that this user's view model can be linked with our SwiftUI view. So to do that, we jump back to our users view, and we will use a decorator called state object. So say state object, say var model, and then we'll call pretty much our users view model. We're gonna get an error here. Okay, so the error is saying that whenever you're using a state object, it requires that users view model conform to observable object. So similar to we had the issue where it's like we were trying to decode the data, but the model required that it conform to decodable. So all we have to do is make it that our users view model conform to observable object. To do that, all we have to do is jump back to users view model and type in observable object, and now the error will disappear. But our preview needs to be updated since we just made that users view requires a users view. So services. So I don't want to have to do this service implementation time. What I could do is jump back to users view model, and inside our initializer, I'll add a default value. So user service impl. Remember, that's the class that we had that actually implemented user services. And just give a visual, let's just see, this is what I'm saying. So user services, that, and then the actual class that implements it is user services. So let's jump back. Yeah. So now that we've added like a default value, it won't require that we give it a value there. So it's just going to be default value. Nice. All right. So we could also change this to and just be like initialize it from now. Let's make it like that. All right. So if we jump back to our users view model, So all right, so the first thing is now what's happening is our users view has access to our view model, and our view model has access to our dependency, which is the services that we can use to get data. So make now a function inside our users view model that we're actually using to call the services to get the data, or pretty much fetch the users. Fetch users, and then inside here, we're actually going to be like services dot fetch users, and it's going to give us an error because one, remember, fetch users is a asynchronous function. It's an asynchronous function, and it also throws. So we have to handle that. And remember, any function that's pretty much throwing, we pretty much are going to end up having to wrap it in a do catch block. So let's jump back to users view model. And we're going to be like, all right, so first thing, we need to update our fetch users function to make it as asynchronous, that it can even handle an asynchronous call. That's the first fix. Next fix that we have is, as I said, we need to put it inside a do catch block since it can fail. See, call can throw. So we'll say get rid of that. We'll say do catch. I don't know why it doesn't auto complete with the catch. I feel like that would be really and then we're gonna paste back inside our do block services that fetch use. So you still see it erroring, and that's just because it requires us to say try, as well as since it's asynchronous and await to. Okay, so like let users for this. Okay. So we are able to get the user's data right here, but before we even like continue, let's just make sure by just that we're actually getting it correctly, and it's as expected. So let's see if we can print the users that we got. And how we wanna, and for the catch block, let's just do print error. And I'm gonna set a breakpoint here, so that whenever this function gets hit, we can actually pause and then get ready to see what the data is showing, successful or failing. So we aren't actually using this function anywhere right now. So what we have to do is jump to our users view, and the VStack has a great modifier. Pretty much views have a great modifier. I remember our modifier is just a way how you can add an additional feature to like some type of view. And the feature we want to add is a task modifier. So the task is pretty much like whenever the screen appears, we want to run some asynchronous code. And the asynchronous code we want to run is to get the API. So we'll say await, we'll say view model, we'll say fetch users. So whenever the screen appears, we will instantly call this API, and we will know if we're actually getting the data or there is some error that's occurring. Let's minimize this. And then, okay. And then we're just gonna run it. Cool. Finally done running. And it's gonna be like the same UI. We don't really care about the UI yet. We want to make sure we're getting the data first. It's gonna hit this breakpoints, and first off, it's good news that it's even still in the do catch block. So that means the API call was successful. So let's see if we were able to decode that data. A quick way I can do it without even printing is I can just look at our menu here, and I can see that we have a users type and it has 10 values. So we know that one, it did decode it, and we see that we have that data represented. But let's see what the print does. Okay. The print showed it like this, where we can see pretty much all the data was decoded and we have access to it. But I hate how this looks, so we can, instead of using print, we can use dump. And I'm going to run this again. Oh, yeah. So I run it again, and now that we hit the breakpoint, I'm going to press next. And you're going to see that we see the data in a much more readable appearance. So much more easier to follow and understand. But the main thing is that, well, we are able to get the data. So let's see if now actually start presenting some of this data inside our users. So right now, as I said, we're just presenting the same thing, presenting the static users row view. What we want to do instead is actually present data from our API. So the first thing we can do is we can get rid of this, dumping the users. And you see that we just have the users here. No really way how to use it inside the view right now since I'm creating it here. What I'm gonna do instead is create a publish variable. And the publish variable, pretty much the benefit of that is that, like, if it's inside an observable object, whenever that publish variable changes, it causes SwiftUI view to update and show those changes. So let's start by doing publish. I will say users. I will make it a type of user. And we'll set it to an empty array. And then instead of just creating a users variable here, let's just use the users variable we have up here already, setting it to that. What's going to happen now is that, we're going to be, this users value variable is going to get updated with the new data once we get it. Problem right now still though is that we're not actually using this users variable inside our view. So to update that, we're going to update our list. So we're going to say list, and instead of just doing it like that, we're going to pass in the amount elements or the elements that we want to work with. So view model.users, and we're going to say user in. So now we have access to each user, which is this, which is inside view model.users. Okay. And you see another error come up that says, well, requires that user conform to identifiable. So if you're using say a struct or a model like this inside a list, each of those structs need to conform to identifiable. And it helps, I think it helps pretty much with, so if you are identifying each element uniquely. Correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, that's how I think. So if we want to update that, just like we did for decodable and just like we did for our view model, we just have to make it conform to the identifiable protocol. Let's jump back to our user model, and we are conformed to decodable, but we aren't conformed to identifiable. So let's just add that in. And if we jump back, the error is gone. So that's good. If we run this now, we're just gonna see 10 of these static data. So let me run the preview so you have an idea again. Okay, so you see, we see 10 of the static data. We're not seeing the differences. And the reason for that is because inside our user row view, we're not actually using each unique user, which is this. So we're getting the correct amount, matching the data that we got from the API, but not showing it. So we need to update our user row view, this user type, instead of just using some static data. Let's just jump to user row view. Open up row view, and you see right here, spread, it's all that static stuff. So we need to make it that this user row view accepts an additional parameter and the user parameter specifically. So let's do let user, and then instead of just saying Brett here, let's say user.username. And then I believe this is work location, so we'll say user.company. Address. Let's just jump back to our here. Okay, so there was actually some more parameters I could have grabbed. So there's actually phone, there's website, there's company. Let's grab company real quick. Actually, let's just add these additional ones into. So we have to jump back to our model to make it that we can accept it. So I want to use company here, but I didn't add that inside our model, so let's do that. So we have to say we're gonna paste it here for now. just so that we don't have to go back and forth, pretty much like we did before. Comment it out, and then inside okay, so an additional property is we have phone. Let me just see. Sure. Okay, so phone is actually phone, website, company, all these are actually on like the outer root. So that's jump back in Xcode, and we just need to go up here and just add this part to user. So we'll add phone, which is a string. Add website if we really want to. It's also a string. I think we can make this a URL actually, and it should be fine. And we have a nested property again. So this is let company, and let's create this. Let's comment this out for now, so that does Swift complaining the entire time. I'm gonna create this additional nested property called this is called company, and just like before, we have to make it decodable, just so that the JSON decoder can decode it. So the things that we need from company are let name, string, a name, which is a string type, catchphrase, string type, S. I don't know what that means, but yes. Looks like harness real time business slogan maybe. I will say yes. All right, nice. And now let's update here and uncomment this, and we're gonna make it our company type. Let's just do user company. I don't like how it's like that. Okay, and then instead of company, let's just say user company. And we can get rid of this stuff now. Don't need this. So now our model completely maps to our data in the API. We don't need to use every single property, and you don't need to add every single property if you're only using two, few, or whatever. But yeah. So let's jump back to our users row view now. And now we can replace the company that we statically added here by using user.company.name. Right? And then for quick light, I believe this was street. So we'll replace this by using that the user address street. And then same for the here, we're gonna switch that to using user address city. And again, since the preview requires it, we have to update the preview. So, and this is gonna be here. All right, so ID is a string, nerdy. Let's add some basic email. Then for user address, we just add some basic stuff. One loop and city, Kingston, zip code. And for coordinates, we add just some basic value. So it's not really, this isn't any real coordinates. I'm just adding in some stuff. I feel like it's always one of them is a negative. Oh, I think this is a string. So I don't know why they made it a string. So let's update that to string. I wish that just automatically filled out this portion. We'll say 876 123 45 678. User URL. This is part of the URL. We'll say string. Have it accept a string. We just use google.com. And we're gonna portion around that. And last one here user company. So catchphrase none. Oh, finally. And that's so that we need all this data to fill out the preview just so we can see this side. Could have just ignored it, but it helps with development. I feel like it helps make faster. So now our users row is gonna be able to use their user property, that model that we have. But we have to jump back to our users view, make it sure that our users row view actually accepts it. You see right now we don't have it because, well, we weren't using it. So let's add the missing argument like it says here, fix, and then we'll just pass in the user. So now let's just do a quick run. So you see right here, each of them are now different. It's representing each different user in each row. I feel like I want to do the different style of the list only because we used this list last time. So let's go to our list and we're going to add a different modifier, which is basically like adding a different feature to this specific. So I'll say that list style, and we're going to make this plain. And if we run this again, you're going to see the list look a bit different. Okay. And we have to switch to line mode too. Switch to line mode is pretty much this, so we can see each row inside the list. What I want to do now is basically we want to make it now that we're eventually going to make it that you can tap on each and then see a detailed view of it. But before we do that, let's see if we can, one, show some type of loading, like a progress view as we're loading. Also, let's see if we can handle for error messages that might appear. And then we'll work on the next couple of things, updating some UI and so forth. So first thing, let's see if we can add a progress view. So to add a progress view, like a spinner as the data loads. Oh, see, we have an issue here though. So where we add the progress view, we have an issue here that says publishing changes from the background thread is not allowed. And the reason we're getting this is because this is an asynchronous function, or probably pretty much updating this user's property, which is a publish from a background thread. But whenever you're making changes like that updates the UI, we should always do it on the main thread. So a quick fix for this. One, you could wrap this in, say, a dispatch queue.main, but a quick fix, more modern way, I guess, right now is to actually use a main actor decorator. And then you're going to see that once I run this, we don't see that purple warning spreading out pretty much. Now run up and down just to make sure that we're not. So let's stop that. And now let's jump back to showing the progress view. All right, so property that we need to show the progress view is, say, a Boolean. We're gonna name this property is loading. Published var is loading. Let's make it a Boolean and set it to false. And then when do we want to show the progress view? When the API call starts, and we want to show it when the API calls finishes, either successfully or by a error. So the first thing we'll do is say is loading is equal to true. And there's a different way how you can do this too. I think you can use defer, and whatever is inside defer pretty much gets called last. So we'll say is loading equal false. So we don't need to put, usually I'd have to put like is loading below this, and then I'd have to put is loading below here too. But since this defer is gonna be called last for this function, it's just gonna automatically turn off. All right, so what we can do now is work on showing the spinner. So let's jump back to users view, and we're gonna add another feature or modifier to the VStack. So the feature that our modifier that we're going to add is called an overlay. I feel like pretty much every programming language has like some type of overlay if you're working with JavaScript or something similar. So yeah, So what we want to do for this overlay is only show a progress view if is loading is true. So we can do that by saying if view model that is true, then show a progress view. All right. So let's see if we can test this just to see what's happening. Let's minimize it again, and we're going to run our API, run our app. Okay, so that was really, really fast. So let's just take, I'm going to put it in the center so you can see it a little bit. And I'm going to run. They're really super fast, but pretty much our spinner is running and then disappearing once it's loading is false. So we can jump to users view model. And we can check this by say if we should not set back is loading to false, you notice that you're gonna see that spinner spinning like nonstop. So you see it here, spinning. But so that's a good view. The reason why this is really beneficial is like you want the user to know, you don't want the user to just be on a blank screen not knowing that you're fetching the data, because what's going to happen is they might end up leaving the app or touching a bunch of other stuff that might, while this progress is in place, while they're getting the data is in place, which might cause app to crash. Bad user experience. So now we don't have to worry about the loading notice to let the user know. Next thing we want to do now is show errors. So to show errors inside, one of the best ways or easiest, simplest ways is to just show an error alert, which is like a pop-up that you will see whenever there's an issue. And one way we can do that super simple is to also add some published variables. So we can say command C, copy that. And we're gonna have two more variables. So we're gonna add one for show error alert. And basically whenever this becomes true, that's when we're gonna show an error alert. And then we can add one more for the actual error message that we wanna show. Message. Let's make this a string type. Make this an empty string. Okay, so now inside our catch block, which is where the errors would occur, we need to use the show error alert, like toggle that, as well as getting the error message from it. So the first thing I'm going to do now is just say, remember error, the error property here, this error variable is just provided inside catch block. That's something I created. So, all right, so what we're going to do now is say error message, which is the message we want to show to the user in the alert if an issue happens. So error message equal error dot localize description. Then we're going to do show error alert dot toggle. So whenever show error alert becomes true, we show the alert. So we need to actually make it that the app knows that it wants to use this, the view knows that it wants to use this. So we have to jump back to this view again. And we're going to add a property called alert. I know it like SwiftUI makes like, honestly, they make it like readable so easy. I'm going to use this alert is presented. I know I'd say it's deprecated. We can do a different one next. But another one who you can use is error. This one right here, which takes a presented, a localized error, and you can do like you can add additional views. But for simplicity, let's go with this one. Just take is presented, and we can just pass in some content that is an alert. So remember we have view model that show error alert. And the reason I have to do this $sign right here is because pretty much one, show error alert is a published variable. And there are certain cases where you want to bind a published variable to some state. And to do that, you have to, whenever you're about to do that, you have to mark it with a $sign at the front. All right, so now let's add in the alert that we want to show. So we can start by just typing alert, title, and then it was text. And then we put that inside view model that error message. Okay. So if we run this now without making any changes, we notice that it's not gonna fail because the API is working. But we can force it to fail by doing a little trick by going to services and basically just changing any part of this API endpoint. Okay, so I just removed the S right there. You can remove whatever you want. I could remove R. pretty much not make it the correct endpoint. And now if we run it, see that we see an error here saying operation couldn't be completed, blah blah blah. Not the best error message, especially for someone that isn't too tech savvy. You want to give them a more relatable error. So to do that, we say let's exit that, and we're gonna put this back for now, just so I don't forget. And inside our custom error, user service error, we're gonna add an extra variable. So var error message. And what we're gonna do is switch on self, which is pretty much the whatever we're inside, the enclosing so we're gonna switch on user service error, which are each of these cases. So invalid URL, invalid status code, custom. What we want to do is present a custom, a more relatable, readable error message. So for invalid URL, I'll just say invalid URL issued. And then for status code error, our HTTP URL response error, I'll say invalid status code error. And now for the custom error, remember this is where we can get some of the detail from Apple inside from our catch block. So what I'm going to do then instead is just say something went wrong. And I'm going to use our error here. So error.localize description. Okay. So now all we have to do I see. Oh yeah. So let's just rename that. I don't know why it's called string. So yeah, error.localize description. Spell somewhere. Oh yeah, I forgot. This is already a string. So we can pretty much just say error message. I just say error text. And copy that. I forgot that this was a string already. So we'll say error text, and then we'll just paste it back here. Error text. And our issues should go away. So basically what's happening now, so for each error that we could have, invalid URL, invalid status code, we have an error message, a more relatable error message that links to it. So for invalid URL, we have invalid URL issue. Invalid status code, we have invalid status code. So now let's jump back to our view model, and we have to basically update it to inside our catch block to make it that instead of just using error.localize description, we want to use our custom error. So to do that, we have to cast error to become our custom error. So we'll say if custom error equal error as service error, user service error, and then we cast it to that. What we can do now is say error message is equal to custom error dot error message, which is the readable one we made thing, and then else otherwise just use the error that we might just get from Apple. And then we just leave this here because in either case you want to do the same thing. We want to just show an error alert. So let's jump back to our users, and we're gonna change the URL, and let's get rid of this, and we're gonna run. We shouldn't get an error alert now. So you see something went wrong, could not connect to the server. This is hitting it pretty much right here. It's a bit harder to test for the status code because that's pretty much based on them, but next thing is we're gonna do re-add pretty much endpoint as expected, since we know now that we're able to see readable error messages. And let's just run it again just to make sure I didn't miss anything and it's still working. Okay, so we're good. Okay, so it's working still. So what did we just do? We added a progress view that we can use to show the user that or some work is happening. Also, we added a readable error messages, which is really beneficial to the user so they know exactly what's happening. That's a big plus. Um, let's see what else we could. So remember we said we wanted to add some navigation. We wanted to navigate once the user taps any of these rows, we want to navigate for different screen. And this is there's a bunch of ways how you can do this in SwiftUI. The easiest way would be to just using a navigation link, wrapping this with a navigation link. Or we could use a navigation destination, especially since we're in a navigation stack already. There's another way using navigation path too. Yeah, let's go with the simplest way first, and then if we want to, we can switch to a different one. So let's just wrap user row view inside a wrong one. Yeah, so let's wrap user row view inside a navigation link. And the one that we're going to look for is one that takes a destination and some label. And then for the label, we just add back pretty much what we had here. But for the destination, this is pretty much the screen that we want to go to. So we haven't made this screen yet. So let's see if we can just mop up a quick screen. We're gonna create another folder inside our users row view, or inside our users view, not row view, called new folder. Let's say new folder, and then we're gonna call this user detail view. And then we're gonna hit a new file. We're gonna make a new SwiftUI file. So this user detail view. Okay. And again, so basically we're gonna be passing each user data to this screen. So what we'll need that user model. So we can make it that this screen requires that you have a user, and the preview is about that, but I don't want to write that all over again. So I'm just gonna back to user row view. Grab the version, mock user version we made for user 4, and it is here, and we're going to use the same exact thing here. So now so we're not actually building the view yet, but we're just gonna do that in a sec. But what we're gonna do now is make it that user detail view can now basically be used inside users view for the destination view that we want to go to. And let's add user. And then inside just jump back to detail view one more time. Or instead of showing hello world, let's show user.username. So basically when we tap on each cell for now, we're just gonna see there's username. We're gonna fill out that view some more, but we just test right now. Let's just stop the sim. And then we're gonna run again. We're gonna tap the view just to test this. Tap the cell just to test this. So let's tap this. I see we do get pushed to another screen with the user's username. Okay, so we know that that's working fine. So what we're gonna do now is update our user detail view, make it more visually pleasing. First thing we can do is say wrap this inside of VStack. Pretty much we're gonna want a lot of the contents going down this direction. We might have some content that's horizontal, but most of it is just gonna be going in a vertical alignment. So say VStack, and then let's say text, and we'll go back to saying user, the username, right? Oh, right there. And we actually have the actual user's name too, not their username. So let's do user.name. So we could the first thing we notice is that I don't want this stuff to be centered, so I'll add an alignment property parameter to our VStack, and I'll call this leading. It's gonna align everything left. And I want to make the user, I think I might need to wrap this in a navigation stack to see the title, but let's run it though, because we did come from a navigation stack, so it should still be inside navigation. Okay, so so you see the title pretty much appears here, but since we're using the preview, it doesn't know that, well, it's inside a navigation stack. The preview is just showing what's inside this file right now, but the entire app is pretty much knows when you run it, the app knows that this detail screen is still inside our navigation stack. Yeah, so we're good. So instead of doing it right there, what I'm gonna do is do user name here, and I'm gonna get rid of this. Let's stop the preview for stop the app for a second and run our preview. So we're not really seeing the title here, but like we mentioned, so the username, and then instead of here, we're gonna say name. And then one of the first things we want to do is we might want their email, user the email right there. One thing though, I feel like I want to change the type of fonting, especially for these text. I'll say font. Let's make this title to be a decent size. And but this, let's change let's set the foreground style to primary. And then for email, we're gonna set the foreground style for this to secondary. It's just gonna pretty much change the colors, you know, like you see how less dark that one is. So we have this. And the other thing that we want to do is what other data that we have that we for. So we have nerdy yardie, we have the username, or the and the other thing is that we have our address data. So one thing that we can do too is say we could be section. And this is just going to present it in like a bit of a different view. And then for the header, we're going to make it text. I'm just going to say address. And for each section inside here, I'm going to add like address info. So that's going to be user address adding bottom. Okay, so we have up there. Let's just push this up to the top of the screen, so not just necessarily in. This won't be an issue since pretty much we will have like a title up here. It's just not showing in our. Okay, I wonder if we could do a form. A form will just pretty much give the screen a different type of layout. You're gonna see. Ah, nice. So you see how it kind of makes it look like a list, but it's like more kind of detailed in a way. So we have like, so you can focus on what it is. The section also looks much better, so you can see address information here. We're gonna do that. So we're gonna have section. The first thing is street. So this is street and size. Oh. So we have street and this portion here. We're gonna say user that's dot that address, sorry. Address street. And we want it to have like a comma beside it, and then we're gonna focus on the actual. So say like user again, the address, that city. You see presented So now we're good. So you see it says Loop Lane Kingston and a common case. Obviously we could have did uppercase here too, but so we have the address here, and then for that we could also have say a zip code. The text the user, that address, that zip code. Now we see that kind of mention. So now we have the zip code. We can use the coordinates, but we won't use that exactly yet. What we're going to do instead is see where we could use our phone number. So one thing I'm thinking is add a top bar view with like a call button, so that the user can tap that and then initialize as a call. But it won't show in our preview right now only because it's not inside a navigation stack for the preview, so it won't show. So let's temporarily just add it inside here. We don't have to. This is so let's say navigation stack. Open that right there. And then now you will notice that you see title. Actually don't want the title to be that big though, so I'll switch to a navigation bar display type to inline. You'll notice it goes to the top. All right, so like we're mentioning, I want to add like a bar button here so that the user can tap it, then it kind of initializes it. So to do that, we're gonna say toolbar, and then we'll say toolbar item placement railing. Like where do we want it? And what we want there is a button. Okay. And this button is gonna be a image that pretty much looks like a phone, I'm guessing. So I don't know if let's see what if they have a SF symbol called phone. Okay, they do. Yeah, it would be weird if they didn't have phone, honestly. It's like a comment. I don't like the circle. Let's get rid of the circle. Yeah, but basically what we want to happen is whenever the user taps the button, we would indicate a call. So you know, like when you're on like a view and you see, or like it pretty much is. So this is pretty much how it's looking so far. We're gonna add in logic to get that call, but we have a couple more things that we have to handle. So we have to also add a site handle for the website as well as the all of this. So let's change this to a catchphrase. So anyone and failure. So this is my law of life. So anyone can do anything with time practice. We're gonna use that in a sec. So to handle calling a pretty much calling from the device using code, there's additional work that we have to do for this. I don't remember exactly off the top of my head some of it, so I'm just gonna jump back to Safari like we all do, and I'm gonna type in instead SwiftUI how to make a call. Let's see here, and let's see what it's saying. I think it's just gonna present it. You have to use it like a URL. Stack Overflow. I haven't used Stack Overflow 4 years ago. All right, let's see what they say. Looks like you have to add on tell to whatever number it is, and then pass that in as URL, and then use URL session to open that URL. I feel like that's an older way. I think there's a much new.
Getting 8 ads every 20 minutes is actually.
I don't know why. Okay. But this other one says. Don't. this some. This is 20. So basically, what he did is use a URL just like they said, added on tell at the front as well as a number, and they my application that shared that can they check if it can open the URL, and then they pretty much. All right, so let's try that. So the first step it looks like is to create the URL that we're gonna need. So naturally, we don't want to do this extra work inside our view. It doesn't really need to handle that. Only thing the view should care about is just showing itself, just presenting the view. So we have to we could add a function in here, but I hate doing that. What I'm gonna do instead is create another view model, but only for detail view. So we're gonna say new. We're gonna add a Swift file here. I'm gonna say user detail view model. Detail view model. Cause we're doing MVVM, and we can't just be having some business logic in the view some places. Pretty much when it's convenient for us, we need to stick to this. So I'm gonna say class user detail view model, and we're pretty much just gonna create a function. We're gonna create a function. We're gonna call this make phone call. Okay. And what we're gonna do is I could just have us pass pretty much the phone number and then handle it, but instead of making it that the user detail view takes this user parameter, let's make it instead that that user parameter gets passed to the view model, and then the detail view can use it through the view model. So let's get rid of this here. And we're going to change the property that we have here to be a state object. We're going to say var view model, and then we're going to say user detail view model. Let's initialize it. User detail view model. Okay. And everywhere here is going to complain right now because it's one, it doesn't know what user is right now. We only have access to a view model. So we have to add that user property to user detail view model and then come back here and then make that we access it from our view. Jump to user detail view model and we're going to add that property. User is going to complain because we're not initializing this. So let's make the initializer. And then we'll just typing it in it and then having it autocomplete. So now if we jump back to our user detail view model, you see the first thing that it says again is that if we're using a state object, whatever it is has to conform to observable, like we did for the previous one. And we know how to fix that now, so just jump to user detail view model, update the conformance, and make it conform to observable. Now we have an observable object. Back to user detail view, and we'll notice that this error is pretty much gone. It is requiring a user though, so what we could do instead, go like this. Okay, rid of the initializer there, and just know that it conforms to this type. So again, it doesn't know what user is, but we have access to user now. It's inside our view model. So the view model dot user. Same for here, view model dot user. I'm just gonna copy and paste this. V. Okay. We could also move this text formatting to our view model as well, instead of having it here, but let's hold off for a second. So now we have our view model, our user detail view model has access to our user, but there is a problem. So pretty much when we call the user D here, when we call the user detail view inside our users view for navigation, we are making it require a user. Don't need that anymore. New requirement is a view model that requires a user. Update that. Okay. So now up here, upstream is fine, and now we're gonna update back down. So I think let's run it first, since we made a bunch of changes just to make sure everything is still working. Oh, got error here. Of course, it's a preview. So let's get this. Now remember, it needs a view model now, but a view model requires a user. So we'll just paste back the user that we were using. Okay, and now let's run it. Okay, so we can still do everything that we can, but now we're still maintaining MVVM architecture. We have no business logic in the view. So one thing I'm noticing, I don't like this, but before we add this padding, let's work on the button. So let's call our function in here, which is the cell phone button, the calling button. Let's say make phone call. And we don't really have to worry about passing in like the actual model here, since the view model already has the user here. So even more logic that's staying inside our view model. Kiss. So what we're going to do now is, first thing it said is that we have to create, come back to Google. It says we have to create a URL, l.phone number. Then we use UI application shared URL to open. There's actually another way too. I think that the way it might work is by using an environment object. The problem is we can't use environment objects from, say, a class like this, a little bit more so from a SwiftUI view. So I'm gonna say like this. So guard phone number URL is equal to, like I showed, it's gonna be tell and it's gonna be the actual phone number that we have, which is user phone. Get this now, and then we can say else return. We can actually make it that we show some visual ID to the user so that they know that if an issue is happening. And we actually don't even have to worry about the guard, since user.phone is non-optional. So we could just do this. Oh, okay, I see what we do need to worry about that. So instead of doing just a string, I need to pass this string inside a URL, converting it to a URL, and then passing what we had before right here. So we do need a guard statement, because this could fail. We could pass in string or number that cannot be converted to it. All right. So the next thing now that we have to do is use UI application open this URL, which in turn will you not actually open a browser. It will more open. It will make it that you can make the phone call. You see that pop up at the bottom that shows making a phone call, and then you tap it to actually make the phone call. You see the pop-up that shows the number, and then if you tap it, it makes. So to do that, we have to use a UI application shared. So we use a singleton, and then we just do open URL. Open URL is deprecated, really? Okay, so open URL, and then we'll just pass in phone number URL. And with this in place, UI application, I think I just gotta import app kit or UI kit. Oh, you know what? It probably is UI kit. UI application. Now, whenever we make that phone call, whenever we tap that button, phone call, it's much. You can't really test this preview. You can't really test phone calls in a preview. In like a simulator, you have to test on a real device. So if you're doing this and you're trying to test in your simulator, it's not gonna work. I think you're just gonna get an error. Let's just see what the error is. But if you want to test it really, just go run the device on your run the app on your actual physical. So I will minimize, and then I'm gonna hit the phone button later, and you see it says fail to open, error domain, blah blah. So this is more than likely because I'm using my simulator, I'm not using a real device like I mentioned. But we should be good. Test it on your device, and if any issues, just add it in the comments. All right, next portion we need to do, we need to build out the the company section. So have the address section here. We need to add some padding. Let's just add this real fast. But it's just really a padding leading. And let's add it to the other text too, right below it. Okay, so it already has bottom padding here. So what we could do is pass in an array instead. And then say we want to add another padding for leading. Just check that. If I tap it, see, we have that leading space right there now. And now the last thing we're kind of going to do is add the company section. So similar to what we did before, we're going to create a section. Company header. Yeah. And then for the header, this is literally just going to say, like we mentioned. And then for the section, just want text. So what data do we have? We have name of the company, catchphrase, and the BS. So let's add that in. So the first thing is the name of the company. Company name. Actually, it's not just user, it's view model user, sorry. Name of the company, catchphrase, add the catchphrase. Model user, putting that catchphrase. Let's just run this just to see what this is. See, we have a different section now, company, whatever the name of the company, and the catchphrase for the company. One way we can handle that. Another thing that we could do too is, what's the other parameter actually? Yes, business slogan. I'm guessing that. For this simplicity, I'm gonna just say business slogan. Just for the preview though, so you don't gotta worry about this. And below, we'll just add another text in. And we're gonna make this business slogan. Company, yes. And then for, let's make the name bold. We don't even have to just say bold. Right, and then let's run it one more time. So we have the name of the company, we have the address right here. Let's make it that our BS is capitalized. So there might be some cases where some are common letter or lowercase letters, or we want to make just make it capitalized. So sure. I've never seen this. Oh, let's just do capitalize. Capitalize. I'm just gonna capitalize each word in a string, which won't look bad. It will look way more presentable. Okay, so this looks a little bit more relatable. Okay, so yeah, what else could we do? Could use these geocodings too, and pretty much you pass them inside a map view, just to help with that. But for now, we don't have to really worry about that too. So we could handle for the website. I don't know where you would want to put that website. I could make it that. We could also pretty much just have a button below this that says "Go to website." I want to use, actually we are gonna do that because there is an easier way how to handle websites now where you can just put link and and just whatever URL you want to go to, and it pretty much just handles the rest. So we're gonna add another. We're gonna add this link property. Say let's add it inside company. Does the link relate to company, or is it just the website? Yeah, so it's separate. It's more so for the user. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add the company. I'm gonna add the URL right below their email. So we're gonna jump up here and go to below email, and we're gonna type in link. And what link is gonna do is link takes a destination description of where you want it to go, whatever that URL is, and this one takes a label, so you can make it like any type of custom you want, or you could just use just basic text. We're gonna go with basic text. So in the description, we'll say visit website, and for the URL, all we're gonna do is say tool model dot user dot wrong property user dot site. And if we run this now, see this visit website, we have to fix the padding here, but let's do that first before I click on it. And let's run one more time. Let's tap. All right, so see it here. Tab site. And it's complaining, I believe this is because this URL isn't valid, not navigating to it. But if you try with like a more set URL, it should just push and navigate to that space. But the link is like a better, faster way how to pretty much handle URLs. So let's time just to look at it. Higher UI just have here. So we're able to see the actual, there's real name, your username as a title, you have their access. You have visit website, which is a button that pushes your website, and then all button here, which is initiate the calling process. We are using a form to present the additional data that we have, like address and the company. So we're worrying about this one. I don't get why this isn't. I think it's because of the URL though. Not open URL. Yeah, it can't open so much URL. I think the type that we're passing in. But let's check it by giving it a URL that we know should work fine. So let's say URL string google.com. We know Google will work. It's failing to open URL or parameters. I guess it wants my application, but before I do that, let's just jump to online SwiftUI link. See if maybe we're missing. Pretty much use the same thing. The type of description and the URL. Back to Xcode then, so we're pretty much handling it how we should. Back here, so we know it's not our side, it's just using that. So let me see if I can run this now on my. I don't want to switch now because I don't want you to see my development. So we have to pause that right there. But pretty much, I'm pretty sure the issue is that I'm trying to open this on pretty much sorry, we're trying to open this a simulator just to make sure. Let's see if we can use our pretty much UI application here to open this URL. So let's try. Because I new one to visit website. And then what we're going to do is similar to what we have up here. I'm going to say the application shared that open URL, and then we know that is user website. Okay. And now when we jump back to tail view, we're gonna do instead of link, we're gonna say just use text here. Up here. Or we could do a button. Let's do a button instead. And for the title for this, just be visit website. When we do that, view model, visit website. The padding there, so it's not too much. And let's run again. Over to Brett. I think this is just because we're using this a simulator versus real device, because this is definitely, I would have to say switch to using your real device just to see what happens. I want y'all to see I'm trying to share, but I'll switch there, and like if I do have any issues that come up after switching, like selecting my team, you will be able, I'll put it in the comments. But link should definitely work. We checked on also the Apple documentation that we were implementing correctly by just adding in some text of what the button should be as well as the URL. And now we switch to use UI application, which we know definitely does work. So it's more than likely an issue that happens when you just test on simulator. You actually need to move to use a real device. All right, so let's see if there are any other updates that we could make to first up the app a little bit more. So let's try Antoinette next. We have, okay, so this looks pretty good. So again, just our recall, we were able to create a list of users. Okay, so we're able to create a list of users inside the users view, and we were getting that data from, or using our services from, the JSON placeholder API. And we were able to get that data, decode it, handling it through Swift Concurrency for errors that may occur. And then once we got it, we pretty much presented that data inside our view, presenting it inside a user role view. And then if the user should click on it, they're able to actually get pushed to a user detail view. That's nice. Another quick thing that we could add that's super fast is that one thing that's good is that like maybe the user wants to pull to refresh. SwiftUI makes this super easy to add. All you need to do is say add another modifier or feature that you want to add to our VStack, or pretty much the view you want it to apply to. So we'll say that refreshable. And basically it's saying whenever the user pulls down the screen, what do you want? What function, what process do you want to happen? What we want to happen is pretty much the same thing that happens in task. We want to get the updated set of users. View model fetch users. This is going to give us an error, a couple things. So First thing is that it's gonna say you need await. Oh, that was it. I guess they moved this to be just handling for tasks. Oh, what I was expecting to say is that it's required that it be a task, but I guess this is fine because it refreshably is handled asynchronously. Yeah, so refreshable is handled async, so that's why it works fine there. If we were supposed to try this in unappear, like just it would give us like that error. But before I do that, let's see. We drag it, get that spinner at the top, and pretty much it's recalling the API, you're getting new data. But the issue I was saying that might happen, I thought was going to happen, is that say if we tried calling an async function inside, say, a synchronous context. So say our example is unappear. So if we said view model, fetch users, and even if we put a await here, we should still get a error here, and it's saying that invalid conversion from async function type to synchronous function type that. So to fix this is we have to put this inside the asynchronous task version. So context. So we do that, add the task, and then pretty much we add the function that we want to call. And you notice that we don't see the error anymore. Okay, but we don't need an unappear and a task, especially when we're handling it for the API to be called when the screen appears. We definitely don't need that here. I would highly recommend using task. And the benefit of that is because say if you have a task running or you're making some API call running and it takes super long and the user decides to navigate to a different screen, what task does is pretty much cancel that that API call just to free up make sure you're handling your network calls more efficiently. It handles that pretty much on the background for you, so you don't gotta worry about that. But yeah, so pretty much yeah, so this is our SwiftUI app using MVVM along with the JSON placeholders API for the user's endpoint. So there are more streams going to come up where I'm going to touch every single endpoint provided by JSON placeholder, and there are going to be some cases where we kind of mix them together. So for this users API, I believe there's another API that links really well with it from JSON placeholder. I think this is. So let's jump to JSON placeholder API, and if you go to we just use users, but if you go to posts, you'll see that there's a user ID. So this is how you can get each post that that user has made. These, you see, these are all the posts that user one made. So we're going to be able to, we are going to add posts to this same project, handling posts with users. So it's going to be a nice combination. We're going to be working with two different endpoints and presenting that data in a meaningful, beautiful. Again, thanks for sticking around. If you like this, just follow and stay tuned for more streams.